Welcome back to the program. Joined now by Rex Nelson of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Good to have you with us.
Roby, always good to be
nice
here.
To
Thank
see
you.
Congratulations on your son graduating too.
Oh, thank you.
That's a big deal.
Got another one out of college, but he's on the way to law school, so now I'll have two in graduate school. They're still not off the payroll.
Well, that's what you get for raising some smart kids right there, huh? That's good.
But both Arkansas schools, both of them went to your alma mater, Hendricks, my oldest, and my younger one went to my alma mater, Ouachita.
Awesome.
Yeah,
all
good
right,
Arkansas
let's talk about
schools.
what you have been writing about lately, and really what the Democrat-Gazette is writing about these days. It's the 200th anniversary of this newspaper, 1819 to 2019. You wrote a great retro history piece about the origins of it. William Woodruff coming up the Mississippi River and up the Arkansas. But tell me a little bit about just what it was like in those days.
Boy, it was a wild place, let me tell you. Arkansas was the western frontier in 1819, and what is amazing is that if you look at all of the great cities that would develop west of the Mississippi, the one place that had a newspaper that continuously operated for decades and decades and decades from that period would be Arkansas, this wild frontier place. And Arkansas remained a wild place up until through and after the Civil War, frankly. But William Woodruff came. He established the Arkansas Gazette in 1819 at Arkansas Post, which was the territorial capital. And then when the territorial capital moved to Little Rock 2 years later in 1821, the Gazette came to Little Rock with it. Because you've got to understand, most of his money was made doing government printing contracts. It wasn't made off the newspaper.
Yeah, back in those public notices and things that had to be conveyed.
And the first book in Arkansas was published by Woodruff. It was The Laws of the Territory.
What was he like as a person? Do we know anything about historically about just kind of his personality or quirks or things?
Well,
about him?
as you're seeing in some of these pages we're printing right now that have taken us up through the 1820s and now into the 1830s. He wasn't afraid of expressing an opinion, and it got him into some fights. Like I said, Arkansas was a wild place. It was a place with duels. It was a place where people would come after you with canes on the floor of the Arkansas legislature. We think our legislature's wild now. Go back and read about those days.
I think they stabbed and killed someone on the floor at one
Absolutely.
point in time,
the House Speaker was involved in that.
You wrote a piece earlier this week about Fred Alsop. I think everybody knows of Alsop Park, but I did not know much about the history of Fred Alsop. Tell me a little bit about, and tell our viewers and listeners about Fred Alsop.
Yeah, Fred Alsop was a fascinating character. I mean, people in central Arkansas certainly know of Alsop Park in Little Rock that's named for him, but Fred Alsop had one of the great book collections in the country, for instance. He was a book collector. He had opened a bookstore along with one of his in-laws called Alsop and Chapel. Now a restaurant has taken on that name that is in the own space on
what time
Main Street.
span are we talking about here on him?
We're talking about the early 1900s that Alsop operated in. He wrote books. In fact, one of my favorite things in my library of Arkansas books is a little book he did called Little Adventures in Newspaperdom. And it's signed by Fred Alsop. Somebody else gave it to me a number of years ago. So he wrote books, he collected books, he owned a bookstore, but he was also the business manager of the Arkansas Gazette. So while Ned Heiskell was the editor and the publisher and kind of the face of the Gazette, a newspaper, after all, is a private business. You've got to keep it going, and Fred Alsop did a great job of keeping the Gazette going through the 1900s.
He did a little bit better keeping the Gazette going than he did some of his business ventures.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he had some other business ventures. The Hotel Frederica, he was an initial investor in. Again, that building still exists. And it is back to its original name on Capitol Avenue in Little Rock with one letter change, slightly spelled differently.
Yeah. All right, interesting stuff there. Well, you talked about a newspaper's got to run right, and the Democrat-Gazette's going through a transformative period with its business model. This move to iPads,
Moving to
and
iPads.
Digital and less print product. You work for the company, so I am expecting some positive spin on all this. How do you see it playing out? What are you seeing that you can talk about publicly of how it is being received?
Yeah, and I'm trying not to talk as the company man here. I'm trying to talk of somebody who loves newspapers. And so I will say honestly, as somebody who loves newspapers and understands their importance, thank goodness for Walter Hussman, who wants to keep a big vibrant newsroom that covers an entire state. There's nobody else out there like that anymore. And to be able to afford to do that, Roby, what we've got to hope is that people where home delivery is being cut out will subscribe to that digital edition so we can continue to fund the newsroom. But you can't go on losing money, and in the majority of counties in Arkansas, the Democrat-Gazette, frankly, was losing money, having to truck newspapers there, having carriers go down streets where there was maybe only 1, 2 subscribers, a lot of gas, a lot of people. I think this is the future, the digital product, and we will see. I know with the giveaway of the iPads, that's unique.
Yeah.
I mean, the company has spent millions and millions of dollars on that, so the entire journalism world around the country, from a business standpoint, is certainly watching this experiment here in Arkansas to see if it works or not.
As long as we can keep reading Rex Nelson, this is the important thing.
Well, you just maybe read me on an iPad instead of on paper.
What do we have?
Be the same words, same
what's in
person.
queue? What you got coming up?
I'm dealing still some more with the history of the newspapers, and so the Sunday piece actually is about the history of the Democrat more, because it was the worthy competitor to the Gazette for many, many decades until, of course, the newspaper war ended in October 1991. So we look back at the Democrat a little bit. And then next week I'll be back out on the road a little bit, a couple of columns from here in Little Rock, got some coming up from Searcy, Lakeview over in the Delta, been to DeQueen lately. So again, I'm trying to still make my beat a 75 county beat.
All right, he's Rex Nelson with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Always
Thanks,
good
Roby.
to see you, my
Always
friend. Thank
good.
you for being here.
Thank you.
All right, we're back. That is all for today's Talk Business and Politics. We're not going to be back. We will be back next week. Thank you so much for tuning in. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.